Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm Jon Favreau.
I'm Jon Lovett.
I'm Tommy Vietor.
I'm Dan Pfeiffer.
This is our last pod before Election Day, so we've got the whole crew here to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump's closing arguments and strategies, offer some final thoughts, and answer a few of your questions. A few quick housekeeping notes. Votesaveamerica.com. Go there. Sign up for a phone bank shift or a text bank shift anytime between now and when polls close on Tuesday. Please. And on Election Day, VSA will have everything you need. Voting information, last-minute volunteer opportunities, voter protection resources. We got it all. So bookmark the site, tell your friends, spread the word. Votesaveamerica.com has you covered. Also on Election Day, please join all four of us at crooked.com/election for a live pre-show starting at 3:30 p.m. Pacific, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, right when the polls start closing. It's just a pre-show. We're not doing a live stream the whole election night because we're too nervous. Just going to be honest with all of you. But what we're going to do, you can follow us on our group thread with some of your other crooked friends. As the results start to come in, we'll be on group thread all night. And in the group thread, we'll be commenting on the results. We'll be giving you information, county results as they came in, all the good stuff right in one place with some levity, hopefully.
We could be live on video or we could self-medicate throughout the night, but we couldn't do both, and we made our choice.
Yeah, my commentary is going to range from mediocre jokes to disinformation, and I might not remember any of it, so get ready.
All right, let's get to the news. We head into the final few days of the race in the midst of the country's worst COVID outbreak yet, and both candidates are responding with slightly different closing arguments. Here are a few clips of Donald Trump from his very crowded maskless rallies.
Many of our greatest companies and labs are coming out very quickly with the vaccines. They're doing great, very shortly, very quickly. It's going to be delivered fast. That will quickly end the pandemic. It's ending anyway. We're rounding the turn. You know, some people said I get a call from all the experts, right? Guys that ran for president 6, 7, 8 times. Never got past the first round, but they're calling me up. Sir, you shouldn't be speaking about Hunter. You shouldn't be saying bad things about Biden because nobody cares. I disagree. You know, maybe that's why I'm here and they're not. But they say, talk about your economic success. Talk about 33.1%, the greatest in history. Now, look, if I do, I mean, how many times can I say it? I'll say it 5 or 6 times during the speech, 33.1. All Biden does is talks about COVID, right? He doesn't call it the China virus. You know why? Because China hasn't paid off. He can't use that term. No, it's COVID. You turn on the news. COVID. You know when they're going to stop talking about it so much? November 4th. You're right. November 4th.
So, at the very end of the 2016 campaign, Trump was relatively, emphasis on relatively, disciplined in terms of message. Hillary was corrupt. He was the one who would take on the Clintons and the entire political establishment on behalf of forgotten Americans. What's the message this time around? Is there something we're missing here? Dan, you want to take a cut at this?
Maybe there's something we're missing. I don't know. I want to hedge my bets in case this goes horribly wrong. I don't know. I mean, like, it is an example. We've talked about this before, but it is an example of just how bad a messenger Trump is he gets this GDP number. It is deceptive, and it actually speaks to the problems he created in the economy. But the headline is greatest GDP growth in history, and he can't find the time to actually talk about it. And so it's basically his closing message, and he has one is, I'm the victim. Here's my grievances, and here are some things I would like to see on Tucker Carlson tonight. Like, that's fully what his message is, I guess.
Tommy, what did you think of Trump's closing message? He's really into the laptop. I don't know if he can explain the scandal.
Yeah, it ranges from adverb abuse to Bobolinsky fantasies. I don't know. I mean, it seems like even Tucker Carlson is tired of the Hunter Biden controversy, whatever it is exactly. It kind of reminds me of the early days of Benghazi when they were still trying to figure out what the scandal actually would be before they settled on talking points. So yeah, look, I'm with Dan. I don't want to sound cocky, but I'm not picking up a message that says this guy will fight for me.
Lovett, how much of Trump's challenge is a message problem and how much is a COVID problem?
It's hard to say because it's like there's two ways that Trump could have gone in the home stretch of this campaign. One could have been to kind of fight inside of Democratic politics, become more serious about COVID after he had COVID, drive some kind of message around a second-term agenda. But the fact that they don't have that second-term agenda, it's like, how do you, it's...
They forgot the second-term agenda. That's the one little thing they forgot in the campaign.
It's connected, right? Because one of the biggest questions people have is, what are you going to do to end the pandemic and revive the economy? Mark Meadows goes on television this week and says, right after the election, we're going to roll out our plan we have all kinds of plans in the works. You have the promise of a healthcare plan if the Supreme Court repeals Obamacare. Then you say, after the election, all the therapeutics are going to come. So there's this sort of like wag the dog, like Hollywood promise of like all these wonderful things that are going to happen after the election, but that's not a second term agenda. And so they resort to the Hunter Biden stuff. So it's like his choice was, do I fight this inside of Democratic politics and make an actual argument in the home stretch, or do I abandon all premise of that and just go to misinformation and distraction and propaganda? And that's the choice he made. It may work. It may work because his actual substantive argument that he would need to be making inside of ordinary politics is so terrible in the midst of a COVID pandemic, in the midst of an economic depression. So he just made his choice. I don't think we know right now. None of us want to believe it can work, but it could work.
Every so often there are tweets from Donald Trump, ostensibly from Donald Trump, that say, I'm not your typical politician. I never was, but I'm fighting for you. And there are these like form written tweets that the campaign must send out. That you can tell is the message that they wanted in the home stretch. And I'm sure their advertising is closer to a message that actually works. Maybe. He is so far off message. Like, if you tell me that Donald Trump could win, I won't argue with you. If you tell me that, Donald Trump's campaign for the last 4 years has been finding and registering non-college white voters to turn out in droves on Tuesday, I won't argue with you there either. If you tell me he's been good in the home stretch with his closing message, I think you're full of shit. Like, that I will argue. Like, I think it is absolutely insane what he's doing, that he's going from state to state, most of which have horrible COVID outbreaks, and he's talking about Hunter Biden. He spent a day on Miles Taylor, who is turns out to be anonymous.
Literally anonymous.
Literally anonymous. The Trump
Still
administration
anonymous.
official. Still anonymous. the Trump administration official who wrote the op-ed and then wrote the book and is a big fucking hero, right? And I was like, what a stupid. My reaction was, what a stupid story. And then Trump talked about it for like a full day.
Let's do it one last change research poll and say, open-ended, who is Miles Taylor? Did he work in government? Was he on tool time? Like, ID this guy. Let's see how this closes.
Let's put up a picture of Miles Taylor and a picture of Tony Bobolinsky and see if anyone can guess who's who. Like, I just don't. He was attacking Rick Snyder, the former governor of Michigan, for endorsing Joe Biden. Like, he is fucking off the rails. If he wins this thing, it will be in spite of anything he has said in the last 2 weeks. I do feel confident saying that.
Who is the Republican politician who ran for president and lost, and who called and had a private conversation with Trump to try to give him some helpful advice? And Trump's response...
My first reaction to that was it must have been Chris Christie, but I don't think they're on speaking terms anymore because he almost killed him.
Chris Christie got out of the hospital, barely survived a run-in with Donald Trump to vote for Donald Trump.
So that's Donald Trump. Like, I don't think it's, and also the Hunter thing just does not seem to be breaking through in any kind of way, because there's a great Politico story about how, like, everyone in the MAGA universe, Tommy, you were touching on this, like, they can't even keep the story straight. Like, Seb Gorka was interviewing Steve Bannon, and he's like, Steve, when's the bombshell? And Steve's like, it's out.
Yeah, I wandered this morning. I was up way too early, and I wandered over into some of the darker corners of the MAGA internet. And the place they've gotten to on the Hunter Biden story is so gross. It is so irrelevant. It is so far from anything anyone would give a shit about when it comes to Joe Biden himself. It's just like character assassination. It's about revenge. It's just the most vindictive, cruel, like baseless garbage. It's offensive. It's embarrassing. It's Rudy Giuliani just being drunk and on live TV all day long. That's all that's happening.
It's interesting, though. I think we have a little bit of a memory hole around 2016, which is we remember it as like the emails as the ultimate thing that brought down Hillary Clinton. But even going back and looking, you forget just how much shit Trump was trying to throw against the wall in the closing days. And and there's a reason it's not as effective with Joe Biden. But it's also just, again, like so much. He would help himself so much with a positive agenda before he gets to the improv misinformation propaganda portion of the rally. But that's all gone. That's all gone. He just gets up there and he starts riffing about Hunter Biden and how COVID is a hoax.
We talked about this in our change poll, right? That we saw, and Brian Beutler has a good piece on this on Crooked. Like, the word cloud of Trump and Clinton at the end of the 2016 race, for Clinton, it was just email was the biggest word in the whole word cloud, right? And when we did the word cloud in the change poll, and then CNN did one too, for Biden, you can see sort of corrupt and son popping up there, but it's all from Trump voters entirely. So it's smaller. And you also see words like presidential, empathetic, caring, competent, right? And I think right now for Trump voters, if you talk to them, they'll probably tell you all kinds of crazy shit about Hunter Biden. We've had volunteers, we've talked about this before, they contact Trump voters and they talk about pedophilia and all kinds of really dark stuff. So it's breaking through to the Trump people, but it does seem, Dan, like he's given up on persuading swing voters a long time ago.
I don't know that he is actually given up. I just think he's wrong about what swing voters care about because he lives fully inside the Fox News universe, right? Like we talked about this with Fox before. Is like when he watches Fox, he thinks he's looking out the window at what America looks like, and he's really just looking in the mirror, right? It has become like this self-actualization of propaganda where the people who are hearing it and saying it have all become one. I think there is a way to look at this and say that Donald Trump, because he has not been able to truly penetrate the Hunter Biden message or all this other sort of like right-wing marginalia, as to say that somehow like our institutions have resurrected themselves in 2016 or the right-wing media machine has weakened. I actually don't think that's the case. It's just the context is different, right? We have one singular issue that is affecting everyone's life in the pandemic. You cannot escape it. It dominates. You can't leave your home. It's affected your kid's school. It's affected your work. It's affected your Thanksgiving plans. And there's nothing that Donald Trump or Fox News or Sean Hannity or Rudy Giuliani can do to change that. And Trump's problem is he refuses to address the reality he's dealing with. Like he needs you can't run a campaign that ignores the biggest issue in the country. And and that's what Trump does on his best day. On his worst day, he ridicules the biggest issue facing the country.
Right, he complains about it. Yeah.
Just today, as we were talking about this in one of his many super spreader rallies he's doing today, he makes fun of Laura Ingraham for wearing a mask. She is at the event and wearing a mask.
I missed that.
Yes.
Oh my God.
He calls her politically correct for wearing it. So 2 problems with that. One,
incredible.
You are doing large, unsocially distanced, largely unmasked crowd events in the middle of a huge coronavirus spike. You are making fun of masks, or you're ridiculing someone for wearing a mask. It is also noteworthy the person wearing a mask is one of the primary faces of a network that has spread a massive amount of misinformation about masks. So it is very clear that at least people like Laura Ingraham are in on the grift, right? They know that the idea is to say masks aren't good for you, but I'm going to protect myself. I don't care if you get killed.
I thought there was an incredibly telling quote from a former senior administration official in Politico. They said, if you think COVID is a big deal, then you're not voting for the president. That's how they see the race.
Oh, man. Well, you're dead. Or you're fucking dead.
Yeah.
Glad they granted anonymity for that sharp insight. What a fucking genius. Well, wow. Nailed it on background Politico. Thanks for that.
Hey, I guess that's their plan, right? Like if you think COVID's a big deal, you're voting for Joe Biden. If you don't, then we got your vote. That's it.
If you think gravity's a big deal, you're not going to jump out a window. Like that's
right. Can I make a quick pitch, which is Dan's idea of when you sort of like you live within your own constructed universe and you think something's a big deal when no one else outside of it does. I think we should call it getting strassled, right? It's when you bite on a pitch, you report it out, you think you just had the biggest blockbuster scoop in the world about Bob Bobulinski or whatever the guy's name was, but you got strassled because no one else cares. The news side of your own Wall Street Journal, Kim Strassel, undercut your whole story.
You got
John liked that pitch so much he left.
He left. John just left.
John was offended.
Quick now before he comes back.
Sorry. I let Leo out of the
Love it,
office.
start
when
hosting.
Emily came home.
I don't care about polls. I don't care about polls.
Yes, you do.
I do. I really do.
So let's talk about Joe Biden. His message has basically been the same since the primary. Here is a closing ad that the campaign released this week.
I started this campaign saying we're in the battle for the soul of the nation. I believe that even more deeply today. Who we are, what we stand for, and maybe most importantly, who we are going to be. It's all at stake. Character is on the ballot, the character of the country. And this is our opportunity to leave the dark, angry politics of the past 4 years behind us, to choose hope over fear, unity over division, science over fiction. I believe it's time to unite the country, to come together as a nation. But I can't do it without you, so I'm asking for your vote. We need to remember, this is the United States of America, and there's never been anything we've been unable to do when we've done it together. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Dan, why do you think that's worked for Biden so far?
The primary reason is that it is truly authentic to him. He's not trying to be anything he isn't or anything he wasn't before. And because it's authentic to him, it comes out that way. And I think that message could be very effective in a more normal time, but it is even more effective in the moment we were in, where empathy and competence and hope for something better just feels so much more important than it would like in a time that felt more normal, like 2016. I know it seems crazy that 2016 was normal, but compared to this, anything is normal. And I think the thing that is interesting, and I've been trying to do sort of a audit of the things that I've gotten right and wrong in this election. And we talked throughout the primary about that the best way to beat Donald Trump was to have the strongest contrast with him, right? To be changed to his status quo. And because that's how that is our lived experience working for Barack Obama. And there was a fear because Joe Biden was also a white man in his 70s, who was someone who had spent nearly a half century within the political system, that he would not represent change in the way you would need to defeat Trump. That he would be there wouldn't be enough contrast. But ultimately, when you sort of, and this sort of really hit me during the second debate, is Joe Biden and Donald Trump may be of the same generation and the same gender and the same race, but they are potentially the two most different people you could possibly find, right? Joe Biden is decent where Trump is indecent. Joe Biden is a unifier where Trump is divisive. Joe Biden is serious and competent where Trump is unserious and dangerous. And I think and the Biden campaign, to their great credit, never diverged from that, right? They never did anything that they had to take a lot of lumps in the primary. They never did a single thing that took them away from who Joe Biden is and what he could do. And I think I don't, like I said, we don't know what's going to happen, but it is a message that has been incredibly effective, and it's been because it's been so incredibly authentic.
Lovett, did we underestimate the potency of Biden's message in the primary, or do you think the context changed because of the pandemic and the recession?
I think yes. I think another thing happened too, which is that Biden did an excellent job. The campaign did an excellent job addressing those concerns. I think, in the primary, we talked about this a lot, that there's this, pool of voters we need to appeal to that are looking for normalcy, whatever that means. And they're, independents, they're moderates, they're suburban voters, are the kind of people that gave us the midterms. And at the same time, there is this progressive base and this big pool of marginal voters or non-voters for whom normal is a crisis and are looking for genuine change, who are skeptical of politics, who are skeptical of politicians. And what has been striking to me is how Biden has, on issues that take off on social media that rile cable news, right? Terms like defund the police, questions about whether or not he'd be willing to denounce violence in protests. He was consistent in making sure he appealed to those kind of moderates and those independents that he needed. But on the policy front, he puts AOC and John Kerry together to figure out a consensus climate policy that doesn't exactly embrace the Green New Deal, but goes incredibly far and embraces some of the goals that people like Jay Inslee had in the primary. He calls upon Elizabeth Warren to help develop the economic policy. He works with Bernie Sanders to get his buy-in on a healthcare plan that's not Medicare for all, but has a public option and is more robust than what he offered in the primary. So there was this really, I think, smart effort to appeal to both of those big groups at once, one on policy, one on rhetoric, and I think it was really effective. So I think it wasn't that those concerns were wrong, it was that they did an exquisite job of addressing them and threading a really, walking a really fine line over the past, 6 months.
Tommy, what do you think?
Look, if the Biden campaign wins by one vote, I think they deserve all the credit in the world, and I will celebrate them in perpetuity. Anyone who suggests they knew how this campaign was going to end when it started is a fucking liar. We're in the middle of a historic pandemic. No one predicted this. No one planned for this, right? I think the one thing that's probably true out of the primary is voters weren't looking for a revolution or necessarily for inspiration. They were looking for an alternative who they thought could win. And they may have chosen wisely. We'll find out. But I mean, that was the driving issue during the primary, was whatever electability meant. They thought Joe Biden was it. The polls suggest he's running ahead. We'll find out.
I will just say on message, I remember in the primary, I was drawn to Elizabeth Warren's message because I am a fan of economic populism, partly because I believe that inequality is an enormous challenge in this country. But I remember when we used to have discussions about Warren's message, and we would say, I do think there's something a little bigger necessary. Like, she talks about economics a lot, but the country's going through something bigger. And right there all along, it really was Joe Biden talking about this is a battle for the soul of the country. And Dan, we've talked a lot about, is it a referendum or is it a choice? And of course, it's easy to say that it's just a referendum on Donald Trump, which this election has become, but that the Democratic candidate should also strive to make it a choice as well. And Joe Biden actually, from the beginning, laid out that it was a choice, that it was a choice between the type of country that Donald Trump represents and where he was taking us, and sort of the better angels of our nature and the better angels of our history. And by talking about a battle for the soul of the nation, it actually was right. Now, I do think that the pandemic made that a much sharper message. And I also, by the way, think it made it a sharper message because the crisis we went through as a country is a crisis where a lot of people were dying and a lot of people were suffering. And Joe Biden knows suffering and knows tragedy more than most people in public life. And I think we sort of underestimate the potency of his message because it is so rooted in his own family's experience. And there's a lot of people out there grieving right now and who've gone through a lot of loss. And I think Joe Biden's empathy is, like you said, Dan, it stands in stark contrast to Donald Trump. But it also just, sometimes the moment just works out. The man meets the moment.
Hope in history. Would you say hope in history rhyme, John?
Yeah, right. And like I said, like Tommy was saying too, I don't think anyone could have predicted that, but suddenly we're in a pandemic and the guy running against Donald Trump is someone who's experienced a lot of loss in his life and is a really good, decent human being. And so it matches up pretty well. All right, let's talk about the closing strategies from both campaigns. Joe Biden's trying to win with a rather conventional strategy of persuading and turning out the most voters in states that add up to 270 electoral votes. Donald Trump is trying to win by doing everything he can to prevent people from voting in the states that add up to 270 electoral votes. The New York Times describes the Trump playbook in Pennsylvania, which may be the most pivotal state of all, as, quote, a three-pronged strategy that would effectively suppress mail-in votes in the state, moving to stop the processing of absentee votes before Election Day, pushing to limit how late mail-in ballots can be accepted, and intimidating Pennsylvanians trying to vote early. The Trump campaign is shopping around for right-wing judges to help them suppress the votes in other states as well. On Thursday, The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that mail-in ballots in Minnesota must be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day, even though months ago the Minnesota Secretary of State had extended the deadline to November 10th, so long as the ballots were postmarked by Election Day. The court has ordered all ballots arriving after November 3rd to be segregated in case the ruling is appealed. First question, Tommy, what do we do about this?
I mean, I think the only thing we can do is do another volunteer shift, tell people to vote early in person or to take their ballots and put them in a drop box. Do not put them in the mail. It is way, way too late to put any ballots in the mail. But just, we shift our messaging accordingly. I do think the thing that people just need to really get here is how disgusting this is. Trump and all the Republicans are lying about wanting an outcome on election night. That is not their motivation here. In fact, they are taking steps in Pennsylvania to slow down the counting process by refusing to let certain boards of election open the ballots and prepare them to be counted. What they want to do is lay a pretext to invalidate a bunch of vote-by-mail ballots because that's what they think Democrats are overwhelmingly voting by mail, right? It is a really dirty, dirty game. And it's something we need to remember no matter who wins. If Joe Biden pulls this out, we need to take a whole bunch of steps to prevent voter suppression like this from ever happening again, because it's absolutely disgusting. And then on top of that, they're slowing down the entire postal service on purpose because, they don't want vote-by-mail ballots to show up to begin with. I mean, it's just, it's mind-bogglingly brazen and happening in the open.
Dan, what's the right way to talk about this for Democrats? What's the right way to message all this in the home stretch? Because you and I talked about this last pod, but there's a lot of alarm, understandably, out there. But we don't want to sort of scare people into thinking that their votes won't count and that it's not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, we have to talk about this from a language of empowerment, right? Voting is an expression of our political power. We control what is going to happen here, right? Not Brett Kavanaugh, not Donald Trump, not some MAGA election official in Erie County. If there are more people in the battleground states and in this country who support Joe Biden and support Donald Trump, if they turn out and vote, we will win. And I think we have to do two things. We should not dismiss what is happening here. We should use it to motivate us to work even harder over the next few days, but we should file it away for afterwards, because as soon as this is election over, whether Joe Biden wins by a little or wins by a giant fucking margin, we have to fix the system in this country so that so the presumption is on counting all of the ballots from as many eligible voters as possible, right? As opposed to the opposite, where now the burden is on you to prove you're an eligible voter before you get your vote counted. And I appreciate the New York Times for reporting on this and the way you talked about it, but talk about fucking normalizing anti-democratic chicanery, right? They have two strategies. The Democrats want to get people to vote. The Republicans are doing shit that would receive a sternly worded statement from the State Department if it happened in another country, right? That is
definitely.
If you're trying to steal an election, that is what you're trying to do. There is one side is trying to win fair and square, and one side is trying to steal it. They are a bunch of fucking yahoos who represent a minority of voters, so I don't think they're going to be able to steal it. But let's not treat it as if it's a political strategy, like he's trying to close on healthcare, right? This is
you see a lot of these headlines because we won a few cases, and it'll say. Victory for Democrats, and a court says that ballots can count. You're like, victory for Democrats, that people's votes get to count? That's a victory for Democrats?
Well, I do not think political reporters are comfortable covering news that is actually not politics. This isn't politics. This is there is a big group of people who are pursuing politics. The reporters are part of that group. Democrats are part of that group. Voters are part of that group. These people are outside of politics trying to stop politics. That's what we're talking about here. And so there's whenever it is covered inside of a political argument, it's another sign of how the press has been victimized by Trump, because they don't have the language, or they're not willing to use the language to describe it honestly, because it means admitting that there's one campaign that is both inside of and for democratic politics and democracy generally, and there's one that just isn't, and its whole campaign and strategy relies on being outside of it completely.
It's very similar to how climate change is covered in this country, which is one side is for science and saving the planet and one side isn't, but you have to treat that as two sides of the same coin instead of one side being right and one side being absolutely dangerously fucking wrong.
Yeah, and it is sort of like these, you make the point about we need to think about voting rights after this election, but this is why I think like win or lose, the fact that we are so anxious, the fact that we are so nervous, the fact that Trump can win is a sign of just how much, like, you know, there's anti-democratic forces set against democratic forces. We don't know how it's going to turn out. Our job after this election, regardless, it's about voter suppression. It's about figuring out how to counter misinformation and propaganda. And that's true regardless of the outcome, you know, because we're in this mess, not just, anyway, that's it.
And it's not just, but it's not just Pennsylvania. Like, right, the people of Florida overwhelmingly voted to re-enfranchise formerly incarcerated people. But then the Republican Party in Florida put in place what is clearly a poll tax to prevent them from voting, and then made it almost impossible to figure out how much you owe so that you could pay those fines. These are like so brazen, so anti-democratic, so un-American actions by these people that, yeah, I mean, we cannot forget it, is all I'm trying to say.
And they packed two courts to do it. They packed the Florida Supreme Court, and then they rigged the U.S. Supreme Court to make sure that their poll tax stayed in place.
I don't want to I mean, you know, if Joe Biden wins, I do not want to hear the fucking pundits and older Democratic strategists talking to the pundits and talking to the reporters being like, these Democrats pretty extreme with their court reform. Like, we have fucking right-wing maniacs on courts right now invalidating ballots, and you're going to tell us that that court reform is extreme? No,
yes, and look, you know, part of the challenge here too is that a whole group of Republicans don't believe there's any political price for being against democracy. That you know, I talked to Brian Schatz about this. You know, the Biden campaign, Democrats generally, they're campaigning on healthcare, they're campaigning on sort of, you know, meat and potatoes, like basic issues, and they should. That's the issues that they think that they can win on. But there's a real, I mean, we need to be honest after this election that democracy as a campaign issue, right, is treated like a process. It's treated like a sideshow, and we have to figure out how to have a conversation, a political conversation that resonates people about the importance of democratic institutions in and of themselves.
Yeah, I think that posture is important here. Like, I saw people being like, well, this Pennsylvania thing, that's why we just got to win one of the Sun Belt states and call it. Like, yeah, I hope we win the Sun Belt states too, and I think we have a good chance. But, like, you know, let's not throw away Pennsylvania just because it could take till Friday. And just because on election night, you know, Donald Trump could be up 10 to 15 points in Pennsylvania because they haven't started counting the mail-in ballots yet. We're going to sit and we're going to wait and we're going to count the ballots. And the winner is going to be the winner. Like, we just got to be...
I just disagree with you. I read a great op-ed by David Gergen in The Hill, who suggested that counting all the votes is divisive. And I think that you should really maybe tone down the rhetoric and maybe just go to the Red Hen with Stephen Miller and kind of work this out.
I do have faith that most reporters get this at this point.
I do too.
I also, by the way, like, I thinking about our Change Research poll, how like 90% of voters who want to vote in this election are paying close attention to the news. And so I do have faith that like people who want to vote are going to figure out how to vote, to like make sure they go to their drop box or go in person if they can't. You know, obviously I am worried about the people who have already put their ballots in the mail with a couple days left and mail delays getting them there. But I you know, everyone should know that a lot of state parties, a lot of organizations are doing everything they can, digital advertising, talking to as many people as possible to let people know that they should not be putting their ballots in the mail. They should be dropping them off at a drop box or at their county election office or show up on election day. And everyone who's listening, you should tell everyone in your life the same thing. We just got to spread the word. But fortunately, people are very, very engaged in this election and are paying attention.
And for all we know, these idiots could disenfranchise a bunch of Republicans, right? I mean, this could cut both ways. It is immoral. It is terrible. Just count the votes.
Right. Republicans should get to vote too. Okay, let's take some questions.
Questions.
Anonymous, so I assume this is Miles Taylor, asks,
hey, buddy. By the way, earlier I said Tool Time. I obviously meant Home Improvement. Tool Time was the show within
the
Home
show.
Improvement.
Tommy, I knew what you meant. I knew exactly what you meant,
We all
Tommy.
got it. We all got it.
I'm a JTT guy. I'm a fan.
I know you live inside the Tim Allen
JTT.
extended universe, and you know.
Dude, Tim Allen's comedy, for me, it just doesn't get any better. You know?
Yeah.
Oh,
This is a man's
I think he's been
kitchen.
canceled by now.
This is a man's kitchen because I use a chainsaw to cut a potato like a man.
Okay, so
Anyway.
the question from Miles Taylor is, do you think there was any media lessons learned from 2016?
I think we need to give the media some credit for learning some lessons. If you look back at the hysterical media coverage at the end of 2016, it was way worse. That was in part because Jim Comey was helping the New York Times put on its front page totally alarmist allegations that the email scandal had been reopened by the FBI. But there was also the Drudge Report. People were running with all the email stories. I do think the way that the Hunter Biden controversy has been handled by the mainstream press has been markedly different than last time. Am I wrong?
Dan, I would love to hear Dan's retort to this.
Yeah, they've learned some lessons. Yeah, they have. I mean, there's certainly more fact checking. The presence of someone like Daniel Dale coming on CNN and going line by line through Trump's lies is very helpful. Anchors themselves are doing it more. Jake Tapper has very aggressively done this on multiple occasions. Others have done it as well. There have been more really good interviews with Trump, like the one Savannah Guthrie did, where you push back aggressively against it and you treat it serious. One of the problems in 2016 was Hillary was treated as if she was president throughout the entire campaign and given that level of scrutiny, and Trump was treated as a sideshow who could never be president. So the media establishment did not care enough about what he did. Not to say that there wasn't a lot of bad coverage of him, but it just wasn't treated with the same seriousness as Clinton was. I am skeptical that this will stick around forever. There's a tendency to really adjust to what happened in political coverage, adjust to what happened in previous election, then get right back into the stupid cycle afterwards. But I'm actually less concerned in the long run about how the press handles this than how Facebook handles it, right? And Facebook has clearly learned zero fucking lessons.
Nothing.
It's gotten worse over time.
It's terrible.
And we can feel great about it's easy for us to say, wasn't that great that Kim Strassel had that stupid fucking totally fake thing, and then the Wall Street Journal behind their paywall came back and said it wasn't true? That's all happening within the universe of people who follow politics incredibly closely. We're not paying enough attention to still what is happening on Facebook and what that is doing to absolutely shift people's belief, spread conspiracy theories, spread misinformation, and totally fuck up our politics. And that is, to me, the much bigger challenge than how the group of very Twitter savvy, cable news friendly media people handle this election.
Yeah, it's what do you do? What do you do when the head of Facebook's editorial board is Dan Bongino? Yeah.
No, I'm trying to be better about not classifying the media as one group, because I think there are a handful of the usual suspects who have learned zero lessons, and we all know who they are. I'm not going to name them all here.
Name them.
But I think
name them, coward.
Give me five. Give me five of them.
I think they are now a much smaller group and a much smaller portion of the larger political press, and I think by and large, the political coverage has been quite good and responsible for this.
Yes, I agree with
this
that.
election. All right. Paul and Ria from Australia ask, there's so much focus on where candidates go or don't go in the last weeks of the campaign. Why? Isn't this an antiquated approach to what drives turnout and engagement in a digital world, or is there evidence that it makes a difference? I don't have an answer to this question. Dan, what do you think? I feel like you might know this.
It does still make a difference, because in a normal world, you'd have a big rally, you would sign everyone in, you'd recruit a bunch of volunteers, what we would often do in 2012 is you would have an early vote rally that is near an early vote location, and then people would leave en masse to go vote at that early vote location. It's different here, but it still matters because you're getting more press coverage when you go, you're becoming more a part of the conversation there. It has more impact than just doing a Zoom event. We sort of saw the sort of perils of a purely Zoom style of regional campaigning early in this campaign when Biden was doing a Florida seniors town hall via Zoom, and he would do it, but it would have no impact in Florida. But there was still something it's antiquated, obviously, about an airplane landing in Florida, all the television networks being there to film Joe Biden or Kamala Harris getting off that plane, putting it on the news. People talk about it more. So it has it's not the game changers catch everything, but it has impact. And the more coverage you get, the more people who would not otherwise vote may be reminded to do so in the way that ensures the vote gets counted. So I think it is certainly worth doing.
Trump gets to capture the data from everyone who comes to his rallies. That's the upside. The flip side is 1 out of 20 dies from COVID.
Would you see that? Do you see that CAP study that showed that half of Trump rallies have led to a spike in coronavirus cases in that community?
Oh yeah.
Did I see that CAP study? pause there. Of course I saw that cap study, Dan. No, it's terrible. There's lots
did I say that because Jesse Lee also DM'd it to you?
Look, Alex Wall sends me something, I retweet it. That's it.
Yeah. It does seem though this year that the super spreader rallies may be counterproductive, and we don't know right now.
Definitely.
Regardless of how many people Trump leaves on the battlefield. The press coverage has always been, a mix between, what he says and also the fact that they are dangerous and irresponsible events.
Totally. Yeah, and the polling is very clear on that too. That people, even Trump supporters, oppose doing these rallies.
They think it's crazy.
So Tiffany asks, in the final days, how much sleep are the campaign managers getting? And Amelia asks something similar. What do these last few days look like for campaign staffers? Tommy is someone who was out in Iowa, sleeping on an air mattress, driving around a truck that you abandoned in the state. What is it like in those last few days on a campaign as a staffer?
Oh, I mean, what a normal campaign would be like is you would, your bag call time would be at 5 a.m. You drive to the airport at 6. You get on the plane to go to your first event. You'd eat while on the ground. You'd watch the event. You get back on the plane. You'd eat in the plane. You'd land somewhere else. You'd eat again on the ground. You'd eat again on the plane. Then you'd fly somewhere else. And then you'd drink with some reporters who you mostly hate until 1 in the morning. And then there'd be another bag call at around 5 a.m. And then you send a lot of emails in between. It sucks.
No, actually, Tommy, as you were just saying all that, I'm like, I miss being on a campaign.
It's so awful. It's so horrible.
I kind of miss that. I miss it a little bit.
I'm eating like that. That's how I'm eating. That's how I'm eating right now.
Well, this is a similar question. Jenny asks, where were you and what were you all doing on election night 2008 and 2012? Let's start with 2008. Love it. Where were you in 2008?
I was watching. So I was just watching the returns as a Hillary write-in voter.
Were you at a Puma party?
I will tell you though, my honest feeling on election night was I did sincerely have conflicted feelings about it because I was part of the Hillary campaign, and I remember over the course of that night, all the ambivalence sort of went away. Like I remember feeling it in real time, like, oh my God, this is happening. This is so exciting. And then I remember walking from my house to the White House because I was in DC because that's where I lived, and just being outside with everybody outside of the White House, just hectoring George W. Bush, the previous worst president in history, while he watched returns himself. And I always remember being outside of the White House on that night.
I remember the three of us were in the Chicago headquarters in the Obama campaign. And I remember the moment that it happened because they called Ohio. And when they called Ohio, that's when we really knew it. And I was sitting next to you, Tommy, and we just looked over at each other like, holy shit, did this just happen? We won? Are you fucking kidding?
I don't remember being happy. I remember being like, what do you mean they called Ohio? What are you talking about?
We were confused.
This isn't right. This didn't happen. And we got on some weird tram and went down to the park and then watched him speak. And then went to some club until 5 in the morning. We were all fucking walking pale zombies, and I don't remember after that.
Very drunk. Yeah. And 2012 wasn't quite as celebratory, though it was pretty celebratory. We were in a hotel in a hotel room in Chicago. Remember, Dan?
I was burning Benghazi documents. I don't know that.
That's right. You were burning Benghazi documents. Dan and I were in a hotel in Chicago.
So, I mean, I was both times in 08 and 12. I was in the quote unquote boiler room where everyone sits for 15 hours in a room, sort of like people from the field staff, the legal staff, and you just get data the whole time. And it's incredibly exhausting. And it's 10 times worse than just scrolling Twitter because you'll get a call and I remember very famously in 2012, getting this call that said, turnout is way down in Cuyahoga County where Cleveland is, way down in the Cleveland precincts. And we are very concerned. I have to call Obama and tell him he's got to put a suit on and start doing Cleveland satellite hits. And in between calling him and leaving a message and waiting for him to call me back, we find out that the turnout was not down. So for 40 minutes, we were in an absolute panic that maybe we had, because you lose Ohio, we thought we were going to lose. Yeah. And total panic, only to discover it's not that turnout was down in Cleveland, is that it was so high that they couldn't keep up with the numbers. And so we were just getting our reports slow. Yeah. And then the other thing, and this is, I think, relevant to election night in some ways for us this time, is the moment that we knew we were going to win in 2012 was when the polls closed in Florida. Because if you remember, and I think we've been reminded this by some of these tweets that show what the polling averages were, Obama was down in the polling averages to Romney up until the very end because both the Washington Post ABC poll and the Gallup tracking poll were giant pieces of shit that were fucking everything up. And there was so much less polling, so it was skewing everything. And we were confident based on our data we were going to win. And we were like looking at our model, and we were trying to tell reporters. We had a gazillion conversations with the idiots at Gallup trying to say, you're doing this wrong, you're doing it wrong. And they very arrogantly told us they were not. They then abandoned their entire polling model 2 days after the election, and I'm not still bitter about it. But
that is some
seemed like it.
that is a small and old grievance.
I let none of them go. But then when Florida came in and they dumped the early vote in, it was evident, and we saw what the margins were. They'd matched our model within a point. We knew we were going to win at that point. But Fabs, you remember because Romney would not concede, that speech was so late. And we went back at the end of the night with Pluff and a bunch of other people to Axelrod's hotel room for our party, but all the bars were closed.
Then shit got wild.
But it
Hacks was on tap, Hacks on tap late night.
It was so late at night that it was hacks on there was nothing on tap. The kegs were kicked because they stopped
all
serving
hacks,
booze.
no tap.
They stopped serving booze in Chicago, and someone, it was neither you nor I, tried to convince the manager of the hotel that because we were friends with Rahm, the mayor of the city, we should be able to get booze.
Jesus
but
Christ.
It did not work.
That's a good idea. That's smart. Yeah. Can I read you guys something crazy?
Bo Belinsky at the bar over here.
Can I read you guys something crazy I just saw? Trump is apparently going to watch election returns from the White House with Pence, but at Mar-a-Lago they're hosting an event for 400 people to watch returns.
Well, yeah,
so if you want to pay a ton of money, go to Mar-a-Lago.
Of course he's not going to watch it at Mar-a-Lago because he's going to be in the White House barricading himself inside the White House in case he loses.
Yeah, he's making a pillow fort.
This question is from Robert Pfeiffer, who I can only assume is a relative of yours, Dan. How much CBD oil is the maximum safe amount to consume in one night? Love it?
Well, it's so funny you asked that because that is my relative. That's my brother.
Is it really?
I confirmed by text this morning. That was that was his question. Yes.
Well, thanks for a great question. Yeah.
I did not know that.
I don't know if science has an answer, but we're interested in you. Look, 2020 is all about untested medical experiments on yourself. That is what this year has been about. And so keep us posted. Put it in the Lancet.
Yeah, I'd say infinity.
Yeah, I think you're fine. Don't worry about it. All right. Final question for you guys. For 4 years, we have been out of the prediction business. We are not getting back into it now. Don't worry. But in these final days, what is worrying you? What is making you feel hopeful? Let's all start with worrying, so then we can all end on a high note. Who wants
voter
to go
suppression?
First? Tommy says voter suppression.
Yeah. It's the system. It's like I am not worried that Donald Trump has some magic trick up his sleeve or he has some closing message or that Joe Biden's going to do something to cost him this race. My concern is that America has completely fucked up, perverted political system that could collapse under this. That's the thing that keeps me up at night.
Love it.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I think our goal has been to make sure that everybody does their part, donates, volunteers, votes. I think no one is taking it for granted. Everybody is pulling out all the stops. And so what stands in our way, it's not the sophisticated message or argument for a second term by Donald Trump. It's the anti-democratic forces we've been talking about, and they're very strong. And at this moment, we don't know if democracy is strong enough to overcome them. And that is what makes me nervous. It is. And there will be, if we do lose, there will be so much hand wringing, so much guilt and so much shame because even that is easier, I think, than facing just how unfair and rigged this election was. And, notions of legitimacy are always grounded in like the law and the process, but there is legitimacy inside of the kind of campaign a person chooses to run. And Donald Trump is not running a legitimate campaign.
I'm worried about all that. I still have a little bit of fear about the potential surge of, Trump voters who did not cast a ballot in 2016 that the campaign has registered since then, showing up in big numbers at the polls. I never underestimate Trump turnout. We have a number of voters, groups of voters, who feel more comfortable voting in person and not by mail and not early voting, especially voters in the Black community and the Latino community, young voters. And a lot of this is like really hoping that they all turn out on election day. And I know that the campaign and other organizations are like intensely involved in making sure that they turn out those voters and help those voters turn out election day. But you could see the combination of a Trump surge with his voters and a little less turnout among ours on election day causing issues. But that's just a little something that keeps me up at night. What's making everyone feel hopeful?
Early vote. I mean, I share your concern that you could see a big surge of Trump voters on election day, but a vote banked is a vote banked. And we're also broken and burned by 2016 that we don't sort of reflect on that fundamental point. And then if you look at the early vote numbers in places like Florida, they're at 72 or 75% of their statewide totals for 2016. Of those votes, like a quarter of them are people who didn't vote in Florida in 2016. And the data nerds have been able to figure out that Biden has like a 9-point advantage among those people. So Democrats are voting early because we do vote by mail and we are more motivated. But also among new voters, you're seeing suggestions that Democrats are doing well there as well. All of it could change, but it is hopeful.
Dan?
I have to admit, I don't know whether it's the anxiety or the fact that I've been getting up at 3 a.m. only to wake up to a text from you with a state poll of middling quality sent to me.
Come on! I always send high quality polls.
No way, man. You're
Trafalgar over here.
I never give you a Trafalgar poll. Nate Cohn or bust.
But I've been like in the last few days, I've been getting like, it's been sort of like the whole thing's been sort of emotional. Like I just was speaking to the Crooked Media political meeting and I got kind of choked up doing it. I spoke at a staff call for the North Carolina field staff and got choked up. And it is like, we do not know what's going to happen. Donald Trump could still win this election. But if you think about where we were the day after the election in 2016, and what has happened since, is that it didn't have to be this way. There was an alternative scenario where people just checked out. And they said, fuck this. If politics is this broken that this guy can be elected president with fewer votes, then I'm out, right? And the exact opposite thing happened. And we've had this incredible privilege to see this back when we could leave our homes and we would travel to do Pods of America stuff, is that people became engaged like never before, right? It started with the Women's March and then people going to the airports, and like the amount of activism, the amount of people who have put so much on the line and given so much of themselves to try to take this country back and try to fix what happened in 2016 it's very inspiring and it is very hopeful in the long run. And the fact that people kept doing it, right? This is not a time where people have extra money or extra time. People are struggling in this pandemic and they are still working their asses off. I talked to a volunteer, a Votesave America volunteer the other day who is a first-generation immigrant, cannot vote in this election, and has been working his ass off in Miami-Dade County for months now. And it's like, that is something that, like, for all the darkness in America and in our politics, like, that is really fucking hopeful. And it's not something we've ever really seen in a very, very long time.
Love it.
Well said.
Yeah. I was thinking about what we were worried about at the beginning, right, in the early days of 2017. And I remember we had a lot of conversations about whether or not our institutions would hold up. And I think the jury's still out. And I think we had a lot of conversations about the harm that Trump could do and our fear that there would be a crisis. And that crisis happened. The crisis that we feared happened, and it cost us dearly. But at the same time, there was especially after the Women's March, the protest against the Muslim ban, there was this fear, right, that this coalition would be exhausted, and that the kind of powerlessness, the disenfranchisement that comes in facing a kind of, improv authoritarian like Trump would exhaust people, that maybe they would have protested at the beginning, but by the time we got to 2018 or by the time we got to 2020, that people would have given up, that they would have been exhausted, that they would have run out of steam, or that just the stakes and the fear and the anxiety and just disagreement would drive a rift inside of the Democratic coalition. That happens when you face an authoritarian like this. That happens when you face right-wing nationalists. And we head into this election with an incredibly united coalition that runs all the way from the right of our party to AOC and Bernie Sanders.
And Bernie to John Kasich and Cindy McCain and the Lincoln Project, and everyone is under one big tent, and everyone has behaved.
It's an extraordinary
everyone
has
thing. Behaved. Yeah.
And look, we will decide what we think of the Lincoln Project come Wednesday.
But it's sort of like a messy, silly coalition, right? There's parts of it that make you roll your eyes and all that, but by and large, everyone has behaved and just sort of driven towards the same goal together. People have argued at times, but in the background, everyone's been I want to be careful here because this is the real threat, Donald Trump, and we got to sort of get together and focus on that.
And that's extraordinary. That's an extraordinary moment in history. That's never happened before. This has never happened before. We've never faced a threat like this before, and we've never responded like this before. And so I think a lot of the uncertainty comes from that, but I think we should be incredibly hopeful in what we built and what we did together because, as Dan said, it just didn't have to go this way.
Yeah. And that all makes me hopeful too, and I want to give a special shout out to all of the Votesave America volunteers and everyone who has volunteered and donated over the last 4 years. You guys have raised $42 million as of a few days ago, over $42 million. Almost 300,000 people signed up to adopt a state. 4,000 have joined the volunteer community here. More than 8 million calls made, 6 million texts, 600,000 unregistered voters have been contacted through our program. 2.5 million total unregistered voters contacted through all of VSA registration efforts. 27,000 poll workers recruited, 1,700 voter protection lawyers. That is a credit to all of you. It is a credit to our unbelievable, fantastic team at Crooked Media. Every single person who works at this company has been part of that and made that happen. And you guys are about to hear from some of these volunteers and some interviews we did the other day. But I had the chance to talk to two of them, and they, one was 13 and one was 18. And I do think one of the many reasons I want us to win on Tuesday is so a lot of the young people who are involved right now still believe that politics is worth it, that you can make a difference, that organizing works, that activism works, and that you can still hold on to that belief, and that we're not cynical about the ability to change this country. That to me is one of the most important things about this election, because that will sustain us for a long time. And you guys should all know that no matter what happens on Tuesday, we will be here because Joe Biden wins or Joe Biden loses, we're going to have a lot of fucking work to do. Probably going to have a little more work to do if he loses. But we're going to have a lot of work to do if he wins too. This fight does not end with this election. Everyone should take a breath. Everyone should hopefully relax and not think about politics for a little bit. But all of the forces that gave rise to Donald Trump are still going to be here the day after the election, even if we win. And we're going to have a lot of work to do. So I hope everyone who got involved and is organizing and is volunteering sticks with us and sticks with this fight.
To quote someone cooler than us, we're not going back to brunch. Now, that's because there's still a raging pandemic and thousands of people are dying. But we're also going to have to keep working.
We're not going back to brunch with plexiglass dividers. And
Too expensive. Plexiglass is too expensive.
Too expensive. All right. You will hear from us right before polls close on Election Day on our live stream, crooked.com/election. And then we will have a full pod on Wednesday. We'll see you on the other side.
Holy shit.